Good morning, friends. It's Saturday. We made it through another work week, and I'm back with Chapter 7 of my upcoming book, Campaign at Fort Stix. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the mists of time with a story I call Change of Station. The shock of finding out my new baby brother was actually a baby sister seemed to have a lasting effect on me, because time got away. I did not really remember the last month of school before summer vacation, nor did I experience the joy which comes with sudden freedom. I do remember that Kenny never returned, and I was told his family had moved away. While we were not the best of friends, he was someone I could talk to who would not make fun of me. He would not necessarily comfort me either, but that was okay. Instead, he kind of seemed to feel a need to educate me in things I was unaware of. Despite my insatiable appetite for learning, I did want to be a part of things around me. I just never seemed to figure out how. I was referred to as the quiet one, and sometimes that weird kid, but never understood why. When I talked about working on cars or building things, others seemed to always disbelieve and say that it was not possible I knew how to do things, or I was making it up. But I had a natural inclination towards building and figuring out how things worked from a very young age. Taking things apart to see how they worked and putting them back together was always very satisfying. I would like to say that my father nurtured these abilities, but it was more like he took advantage of them. When I was 5 years old, we lived in the desert town of Whitman, outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Dad worked at a body shop in the city, but brought home vehicles to work on for his friend that owned a car dealership. He had me water sand the painted lettering off a truck he was going to repaint. I can also remember scouring the neighborhood and asking neighbors for scraps of wood to build a cage for some kangaroo rats which I had caught in our barn. The same barn where I found my first black widow spider while separating flakes of hay from a bale for my horse. The horse was a paint given to my father by an old Indian in return for fixing his car. One day, he just showed up at our house riding the horse. He asked my father to fix his car and left the horse there when he rode with us back to his house. On the way out to the reservation, the old Indian pointed to a saguaro cactus not far off the road. There was a cowboy hat stuck in the top of the cactus with an arrow sticking out of it. He told me that that was his arrow and he had shot the hat off a guy who was trying to steal one of his horses. At 5 years old, I did not have it in me to disbelieve him, and to this day, I do not know if it was true or not. But either way, I think giving the horse to my father was a joke, because that horse could not be ridden by anyone but him. I watched my father try several times, and each time it bucked him off. When there was no one looking, I tried on numerous occasions, somehow believing I was more stubborn than that horse. It would stand calmly as I climbed on the 3-rail fence and put a saddle on it, and even open its mouth willingly to accept the bit. Then when I tried to climb into the saddle from the fence, it would buck me off. Several times, after I had picked myself up off the ground, the horse kicked me square in the stomach. It was as if it was saying not to try that again. On the last occasion I tried to ride it, when I got up from the ground, I quickly moved it out of the way of the hoof I knew was coming. It missed me, and I slapped it hard on the haunches as punishment. That did not go over so very well, because the horse reached around and bit my behind hard. I had a bruise there for a week. Once the pain subsided, I removed the saddle and never tried to ride that horse again. Not long after that, we moved to Phoenix, and my dad just opened the corral and set the horse free. He told me sometime later that the horse went back home to the old Indian. My dad then bought an old ski boat. I was recruited to help rebuild the boat, and spent many hours learning how to fiberglass and roll gel coat onto the hull. My friends at school did not believe me then when I talked about the boat until one of them came over after school and actually saw me working with my dad. There were a good many things I would have liked to share with my friends at school, but did not, from fear of ridicule. While living in the desert, I was part of many adventures and saw many things that most never experienced. For extra money, my dad would hunt and catch live rattlesnakes and take them to the university where they were milked to make anti-venom. This involved riding down desert roads just after sunset to find snakes that crawled onto the road for warmth. Dad would stop the car, jump out and grab the snakes with a hoop stick and then stuff them into burlap sacks. One night, a bag of snakes opened in the car and there was a mad scramble to exit the vehicle while my dad rounded them up again. After that, my mother made him keep the bags of snakes in a box in the trunk where they could not escape. One evening, just after dark while I was playing in the backyard, I heard a noise. Looking up, I saw a small troop of ringtail cats chasing kangaroo rats in the rocks out behind our property. On another occasion, I watched a roadrunner catch and kill a rattlesnake before flying off to enjoy its meal. There were also scorpions and coyotes howling at the moon. These were just some of the things I wanted to share. After that school year ended, my family moved across town into a larger house. Not long after that, my father parked an old car in the backyard behind the garage and handed me a bag of tools. I was instructed to take the car apart, piece by piece, and cautioned not to break anything because he wanted to sell the parts. I was 7 years old and reduced that car to a body and frame. It was then revealed to me that the car was going to be rebuilt for stock car racing. My dad's car dealer friend agreed to sponsor him in return for advertising on the car. I got to help build the car, but only saw it race twice before I got on a plane and headed to Indiana to spend the summer with my grandparents. It was also at this house where I started to learn how to care for farm animals. After helping my father build a coop, he brought in a bunch of baby chickens and pheasants. As an afterthought, he also bought a calf. It was my job to keep the chicken coops clean, feed and water the chickens, and give the calf his bottles of formula. Looking up as the truck stopped, I saw we were at the farm. I tucked the memories away for later reflection and wondered about what new memories awaited me here. I climbed out to help unload the boxes from the back and carry them into the house. We were home, on the farm now, and this was the last load of our things that needed to be moved. I watched Dad carry the television into his room where Mom was feeding the baby and decided it was time for a shower because I was hot and sweaty. Grabbing some clothes and a towel from the bag in my room, I went into the bathroom and closed the door. When I tried to turn on the water in the bathtub for the shower, it did not come on. "Dad," I called to him, "the water in the bathtub doesn't work. I can't take a shower." "You have to go to the basement where I set up a temporary shower," he said. "I will hook up the water to the tub tomorrow." Feeling a bit unsure, I left the bathroom and opened the basement door. It was dark outside now, and I knew there was a window down there that looked into the side yard. Flipping on the light, I slowly descended the stairs and looked around. A towel had been hung over the window for privacy, but that did not make me feel much better. The basement still looked more like the inside of a well to me, and it was creepy. Boards had been laid down from the stairs to a spot near the floor drain, and above this was a shower head attached to a faucet. I hung my clean clothes on the stairs and quickly undressed. If I had to take a shower down here, it was going to be a very quick one. Turning on the water, I was surprised at how cold it was as it cascaded over me and quickly stepped out from under it. This would be quick indeed. I lathered up with the soap I found on the water heater, rinsed off, and shut the water off. I was no longer hot and sweaty. As I dried off and dressed, I watched the water at the floor drain quickly going away. Looking at the new white PVC pipe above my head in the floor joists under the bathroom and over to where it went outside through the wall, I wondered how the water on the floor could possibly be flowing outside. Water does not flow uphill. I decided I would have to investigate this in the daylight and was about to leave the basement when I noticed a small door at the top of the inner wall towards the front of the house. It was very small, maybe 2 foot square, and held closed with rotating wood latches, much like the one on Fort Stix. It occurred to me the latch on Fort Stix could be opened from either side, and I raced out of the basement before something could come through the door after me. Standing at the top of the stairs, trying to catch my breath, I was startled by a screeching noise behind me. "I'm hungry," Mark whined from his position outside my parents' door. "When are we going to eat?" "It's almost ready," my mom called from the bedroom. "Go change into pajamas. It will be ready soon." I had not even considered dinner, but my stomach grumbled as I watched Mark trudge off to our room pouting. I went into the kitchen to see what was cooking and saw TV dinners in the oven. They were bubbling and looked like they were about done. Grabbing a glass from the dish drainer, I got a drink of water as my mother came in and took the food from the oven. Motioning to the dining room, I followed Mom in with my glass of water and sat where she told me as she put the meal trays on the table. Lying in my bed after dinner, I looked over at Mark on the small bed my dad had set up for him by the dresser. He was already asleep. Looking out the window, the moon seemed to hang above the western trees bordering the field where Fort Stix stood. Moonlight cast a silvery glow, making everything stand out in sharp relief. I could see the garage, Fort Stix, and the outhouse. Even the taller weeds and bushes were visible in the field all the way to the edge of the woods where darkness prevailed. The moon had no power over the darkness of the woods, which looked black in comparison. At the tops of the trees, I could see the odd branch sticking up, but at ground level, it was dark. I imagined anything wanting to sneak around outside tonight would follow the edge of the woods as I did now with my eyes. Slinking along, unseen to anyone, creatures of the night could move along the edge of the trees, through the high weeds behind the far side of the garage, and out into the field in the shadow of the garage. From there, it was a very short distance to the outhouse. I pulled away from the window and snuggled into the covers of the large bed, thankful we had built a bathroom in the house. I would not want to have to go out there to use the bathroom at night. Supposedly, the large queen-size poster bed I was lying on would be moved to my parents' room and would be replaced with a new set of bunk beds. As I drifted off to sleep, I kind of hoped it would not happen too soon, as I liked the old bed. Up with the sun, I was scrounging through boxes looking for my cereal when Mark wandered into the kitchen. Together, we dug out cereal, bowls, and spoons and sat to eat our breakfast. Normally, we would watch cartoons, but since Dad had the television in his room, we sat at the kitchen table. When we were finished, Mark headed back toward our room, and I stepped onto the back porch. Looking around, I tried to decide what I wanted to do. I had a lot of exploring to do on this new place, but considered I should check my garden first. I headed down the stairs and across the yard, grabbing a bushel basket from the pile next to the porch as I went. It seemed my hard work was paying off, as I found several ripe tomatoes and cucumbers right away. Moving deeper, I found yellow squash, zucchini, and radishes as well. The vegetables were placed into the basket after being carefully harvested, and I carried them back to the house where I put them on the kitchen table so my mom would see them. There was no indication my parents were up yet, and I didn't expect to see them until around lunchtime. I had heard my sister start to cry while we were eating breakfast, but this stopped quickly, so I knew Mom had brought her into bed with her so she could nurse while Mom slept. I had seen her do this several times before. Wandering out to Fort Stix, I opened the door and went inside. The eastern wall was warming up from the sun shining on it, and the air inside was kind of stuffy. After sitting on my bucket for a few minutes, I went outside to look around. All around me in the field were discarded car parts from very old vehicles. I knew they were old because of the rounded shapes. Most vehicles in this day were kind of square at the corners, but older vehicles had large, sweeping curves. Curious, I walked to the nearest car door and lifted it up for a better look. The ground below came to life with quickly moving stripes of black and yellow. There were garter snakes under the door. These, I knew from past experience, were not poisonous and made great pets. I grabbed the nearest one, which was about 2 feet long, and held it up to get a better look. The snake seemed to look at me in the eye as I held it out in front of my face and slowly flicked its tongue in and out. I slowly stroked its head and set it gently on the ground. It seemed to understand I was not going to hurt it and slithered slowly back under the door. Curious, I went around the field lifting car parts and counted the snakes hiding there. Unless they were inflating their numbers by crawling from where I was looking to a part I had not yet lifted, there were 38 snakes in my field. Some were a little larger than the first I caught, but most were much smaller. Indeed, several were not much bigger than a nightcrawler. I put a couple of these in my pocket to show Mark later. Walking back toward the house, I noticed my dad was out in the garage getting a truck ready to paint. I went in to watch and was quickly recruited to begin masking chrome parts in preparation for paint. By the time I was finished, my dad had the windows and things I could not reach masked off and was beginning to mix his paint. I watched him give the entire truck a wipe down and then left as he began to paint. Mom must have seen me by the back porch because she stuck her head out the screen door and said it was time for lunch. I went in and found a plate with a bologna sandwich and some chips waiting for me. Climbing into my chair, I ate the sandwich while looking out at the woods across the backyard beyond my garden. I knew that the woods to the left of the house ended at Grandpa's house down the hill, but I had no idea how far the woods stretched out behind the house. As I ate, I decided that today would be a good day to find out how big the woods were. I left Mark still eating as I put my plate in the sink and headed off to the bathroom. When I finished washing my hands, I watched the water go down the drain and remembered the floor drain in the basement. Where was that drained to? It couldn't be part of the new pipes we put in because the floor was about 5 feet below the level of the dirt outside. I went down to the basement and looked out the window. Judging the height of the windowsill from the ground outside, I looked at the floor drain. If I were outside standing down the hill and looking at the window, my feet should be about where the drain pipe should be. Maybe there was another pipe system. Thinking about it, I turned the shower on and let the water run into the drain. I figured if the water was in a different pipe, I might be able to hear it if I was outside on the hill. As I started to head up the stairs, I heard Mark screaming for Mom, followed by Mom shrieking for my father. I ran upstairs to see what was happening and found my mother standing by the kitchen counter, looking into the dining room. In the dining room, Mark was standing on his chair. The remains of his chips and sandwich were scattered all over the table, and he was staring at the floor near the head of the table. I realized immediately what happened when I saw what he was looking at and stuck my hand in my pocket. Sure enough, the pocket was empty and the snakes I was looking at were mine. Somehow they had escaped while I was eating. Scooping up the snakes, I shoved them in my pocket and nearly ran my dad over as I bolted out the back door with them. I could hear my mom telling him what happened as I disappeared around the corner. I stopped under the kitchen window that overlooked the path to Grandpa's house to catch my breath. Taking the snakes out, I checked to ensure they weren't harmed and put them back in my pocket. Then I heard the sound of gurgling water. Following the sound down the hill, I found a rusty steel pipe sticking out from the ground with water flowing from it. I looked up at the basement window and realized this must be the pipe to the floor drain. It was at the right elevation. With the mystery solved, I just needed to turn the water off before Mom or Dad found it, and then I could explore the woods. I peeked into the kitchen window from the edge of the porch. No one was in the kitchen or dining room that I could see, so I quietly made my way in and headed for the basement, pulling the door closed behind me. Once the water was turned off, I turned to go up the stairs when I heard the toilet flush above. I was sure I could hear thumping in the new sewer pipe above me as the water gushed through it. Then I heard footsteps coming out of the bathroom. There was no way I could get up the stairs and out the kitchen door without being seen. I looked around the basement. No, I didn't want to spend the afternoon here. Looking to the windows, I realized it was big enough for me to crawl through, so I opened it and crawled out. I made sure to close the window and went straight down the hill away from the house before turning to head toward the woods at the back. I needed to be gone long enough for the snake incident to be forgotten. I hope you enjoyed this little look into the campaign at Fort Stix. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next week with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.